Imagine a place that is not on the map. Not in guidebooks, not in tourist brochures. Even on satellite images, it is hidden by clouds and white spots. But the old people of Alaska know its name and whisper a warning. Don't look at the reflection after midnight. This is Shadow Lake. It lies in the middle of the endless tundra, surrounded by rocks and permafrost. It looks like an ordinary body of water. But if you linger here at night, you can hear strange sounds, like a whisper or a call. They say that the water holds not only the reflection, but also the soul of the one who looks into it. The history of this place has been going on for more than a century and a half. Dozens of people have disappeared here. Letters, diaries, military reports, films, and digital recordings have been preserved in the archives. And they all say one thing: the lake is calling. And today we will try to follow in the footsteps of those who tried to unravel its mystery and never returned. Part 1. Ancient Legends. Long before explorers and missionaries came to Alaska, the Tanana tribes told their children scary stories. Around the campfire, the old men would say, "Don't go to the black water at night. It drinks your image. In the morning, your eyes will already be looking through the ice from below." Ethnographer Edward Hopkins, who arrived here in 1853, recorded the words of a shaman named Nootka. The lake remembers everything it sees. It is a mirror, but a mirror with memory. If you look into the water long enough, one day the reflection will no longer be yours. It will remain there, and you will disappear. Surprisingly, his notes also contain a warning that is still repeated today. If you hear a call from the water, do not answer. First Russian mentions. Even earlier, in the middle of the 19th century, Russian hunters passed through these places. In the reports of the Yakut Company of 1847, there is a strange entry. In one of the lakes, voices were heard at night, as if someone was knocking on the ice from below. People crossed themselves and left there, leaving their gear. At that time, it was considered superstition. But it was from those times that the lake received the name Black Water among the local Russians. 1874. Hunter's Gang. The Seward City archives contain a report from a district official. In October 1874, a gang of 8 hunters did not return from hunting. Their boats were found on the shore without damage. Skins and weapons were left in the camp. But there were no people. The tracks led to the lake and ended at the very edge of the ice. This was the first documented case of people being taken by the Black Water. The locals immediately said, "They looked in the wrong place." 1879. Diary of a Missionary. 5 years later, a missionary, Father Andrew Collins, came to the lake. His diary was preserved in the church archives. "Last night I was awakened by a strange sound. It seemed as if someone was singing right under me, underground. I went out to the water and saw figures moving under the ice, like people in long robes. But Lord, there could be no one there. The next day I told the locals about it. The old people just shook their heads. You saw those who drowned. Now their images belong to the lake." These lines were the first attempt to describe what would later be called the Lake of Shadows. 1886. Newspaper article. The Alaska Herald published an article under the headline, "Dead Eyes in the Water." The journalist described the story of a fisherman named Thomas Gray. "We were fishing on the west shore when the ice melted. I bent down to get some water, and in the reflection I saw a face that was not my own. It was older, the eyes were empty, like glass. I screamed, jumped back, but my comrades saw nothing. Since then, I have not gone to the lake." The newspaper was then accused of sensationalism, but the article spread throughout Alaska. Locals began to call the reservoir Lake of Dead Eyes. 1892. Disappearance of the Hayden family. In July 1892, a family of settlers, a husband, wife, and 2 children disappeared. Their house was located just a few kilometers from the lake. The County Chronicles wrote, "The door was open, food on the table, as if the family had just eaten dinner. Barefoot tracks stretched toward the water. There they disappeared. No bodies or clothing were found. Rumors quickly grew more detailed. Neighbors claimed to have heard children's laughter coming from the lake the night before. Consequences. By the end of the 19th century, the lake had already acquired a bad reputation. People began to avoid its shores. On old maps you can see a mark, danger, do not approach. But it was this reputation that attracted the first explorers of the 20th century. Confident that the legends could be explained by science. 1932. Expedition of geologists. The archives of the University of Fairbanks contain records of an expedition sent in 1932. 5 young geologists were looking for promising copper deposits in the lake area. The first days were ordinary. Descriptions of rocks, measurements. But then strange lines appear in the diaries. From the diary of Robert Milton, June 14, 1932. Today the ice made a humming sound, as if someone was beating a drum from below. We laughed, joked about musician fish, but at night I heard the knocking again, right under the tent. None of the comrades woke up. I can't explain it. The sound was rhythmic, as if someone was knocking on the door. June 17th. The lake is strange. During the day it looks like a black mirror, does not reflect clouds. And in the evening images appear in it. I saw my mother's face. She died 10 years ago. A week later, the expedition lost contact. When the rescuers reached the camp, the tents were untouched. Things were in place. Words were found carved into the ice with a pick. Someone is knocking. None of the geologists were seen again. After World War II, the United States actively developed Alaska as a strategic frontier. In 1948, winter Army exercises were held here. Reports declassified only in the 1980s say, one of the soldiers, Private Frank Wallace, disappeared while patrolling the perimeter. 2 days later, he was found on the shore of the lake in a state of severe shock. He couldn't speak coherently, he just kept repeating, I saw my mother. She was calling me under the ice. The private's mother died in 1939. Doctors attributed it to hallucinations and stress. But since then, the military has avoided conducting exercises in the lake area. The documents were marked, the zone is not recommended for troop deployment. In the summer of 1965, 3 students from Vancouver went on a hike in Alaska. They wanted to test themselves and spend a week in tents. Their route passed by Shadow Lake. They didn't return after 10 days. The search lasted almost a month. They only found a tent neatly set up with things inside. A Kodak camera with film was in a backpack. After developing it, it became clear the last frames were the most terrible. In the photo, the students are standing by the shore, smiling. But behind them, in the reflection of the water, several more figures are visible. Their faces were blurry, as if blurred, but one of them clearly repeated the expression of one of the students. The next frame was ruined, only blurry spots and black streaks, as if the film was melting. The bodies were never found. The Anchorage Daily News ran with the headline, Hikers disappear at Shadow Lake. Only their reflections found. In 1971, a local forest ranger, Arthur Hayden, left a report, patrolled the North Shore. In the evening I heard voices. It seemed as if my comrades were calling my name. But I was alone. I leaned over the water and saw that the reflection was late. I blinked, and it continued to look at me. Will not go there again. This entry was included in the internal documents of the Park Service, but was not made public until decades later. A CBS Anchorage journalist interviewed an old man named Joseph Kunec, the last bearer of the Tanana traditions. He said, the lake is a door. It opens when someone yearns for the dead. Then the water shows them the face of the one they lost, and the person follows the reflection. But there is no return. These words became prophetic. It was at the end of the 20th century that a new round of disappearances would begin, already captured on camera. sparkles thus. By the end of the first half of the 20th century, Shadow Lake had turned from a local legend into an object of official reports and newspaper sensations. It became a symbol of a living mirror that can show the most terrible thing, your own reflection, torn away from you. Summer. Two brothers, Mark and David Walton, students from Fairbanks, decided to spend their vacation in the wild Alaska. They took everything they needed with them: a tent, a supply of food, and a brand new VHS video camera that their father bought them for their birthday. The first frames of the film look harmless. A tent on the shore, laughter, a campfire, young voices. The guys are singing songs, fooling around. The camera is shaking in the wind, and nothing foreshadows trouble. But at the 40th minute of the recording, a strange sound is heard low, like a hum underwater. Mark, holding the camera, comes closer to the shore and points the lens directly at the ice. At that moment, something creepy appears on the film. A figure is standing in the reflection next to him. Vague, translucent, but its head turns synchronously with his movements. "Did you see that?" David's voice is heard. "Yes, but there's no one there," Mark answers. They laugh nervously, thinking that it is a trick of the light. But after a few seconds, the sound is repeated. Now it sounds like a knock, as if someone was hitting the glass from the inside. The film ends abruptly. The camera falls to the ground. The image is distorted. Screams are heard. After that, only white noise. A week later, the district reported the disappearance of two students. Their camp was found. Their belongings were left untouched, and the camera was lying near the shore. The film was sent for examination, but in the official documents they wrote, "Recording defects, play of light." The brother's father claimed until the end of his life, "There is something more on the film. They saw what was called from the water." By that time, the story about the Walton brothers had already become overgrown with rumors. Local television decided to film a report, Dangerous Legends of Alaska. The group consisted of 4 people: a correspondent, a cameraman, and 2 assistants. The footage has been partially preserved. You can see how the reporter stands against the backdrop of a lake and talks about Indian myths. He smiles, jokes. Everything looks like an ordinary TV shoot. But suddenly the cameraman lowers the camera down. In the recording, you can hear him quietly whispering, "Who said my name?" The reporter looks at him in bewilderment. "What are you talking about?" And then the microphone picks up a female voice repeating the last words of the correspondent, only with distortion as if through water. "What are you talking about?" The assistants assure that they heard nothing. But on the tape, this voice sounds clear and distinct. After a few minutes of filming, the reporter suddenly falls silent, turns pale and says, "I hear her. It's my mother." He goes to the water, but his colleagues manage to grab him and pull him away. Filming was immediately stopped. The official release of the report was aired on television in a greatly abbreviated form, without mentioning the voices and oddities. The channel stated, extraneous noises on the recording were caused by technical problems, but the cameraman later admitted to journalists unofficially, "I heard them calling me by my childhood nickname. Only my mother knew him. She died when I was 10. After that, he quit his job on television." The story became widely known. Curious people began to visit the lake to check the legend. In the summer of 1989, 6 tourists went there with a guide. They planned to spend the night by the water, to see for themselves that it was all a myth. The night passed peacefully, but in the morning, the guide was awakened by a strange rustling sound. He left the tent and saw all 5 of his companions were standing by the shore. They were looking into the water, motionless, as if enchanted. "Hey, what are you doing?" he shouted. But no one answered. One by one, the tourists began to go into the water, fully dressed. The guide rushed to them, tried to pull them away, but they seemed not to hear. He screamed until he was hoarse, but by morning he was alone. When he showed up in the nearest town and told what had happened, the police suspected him of murder. The investigation lasted a month. In the end, no evidence was found against him, and the man was released. He left Alaska and never showed up there again. The newspapers called this event Shadow Lake took 5 more. Sparkles. By the end of the 1980s, the lake had become more than just a legend. Now people had video recordings and testimonies that could not be written off as just rumors. But the most frightening thing was yet to come. In the 1990s, the voices began not only repeating words, but also asking questions. In the early 90s, paranormal researcher Donald Hale gathered a group of volunteers to conduct night observations at the Shadow Lake. He had equipment: microphones, voice recorders, spectrum analyzers. Hale was skeptical. He wanted to prove that all this was just acoustic illusions. The first night passed quietly. The sound of the wind, the crackling of ice. But on the second night, the dictaphones recorded something strange. The recordings sound like someone whispering the words of the participants. But after a few minutes, the voices begin to go beyond the echo. The phrases were short but clear. "Can you hear me? Why did you come? Who did you lose?" Hale claimed that not a single person in his group heard these words at that moment. Only the equipment. When he published a report in the Occult Review, the reaction was stormy. Some called it a fake, others a sensation. But it was then that they first started talking about the fact that the Lake of Shadows was not just a voice repeater, but something with its own mind. 3 years later, geophysics professor Richard Lawrence organized a large-scale study. 10 people, modern equipment, thermal imagers, magnetometers, video cameras. On the first day, everything went according to plan. Scientists recorded magnetic field surges and strange temperature fluctuations. But at night, what would later be called the Lawrence catastrophe began. The survivors' testimonies sound like this. "I heard my wife's voice. She died 3 years ago. She called me, 'Richard, come home.' I knew it was impossible. But my feet went to the water on their own. My colleagues held me back. If it weren't for them, I would have left." From Lawrence's report, 2 members of the expedition ran to the lake and never returned. The rest packed up camp in panic. The tape recordings, later called Echo 94, have survived. There you can hear dozens of voices, interspersed with crackling sounds. "Don't come back. Help me. We're under the ice." The scariest part is when the voice repeats Lawrence's words before he says them. First, the tape says, "We have to leave," and a few seconds later, the professor says the same thing. Officially, the reports called it panic and hallucinations. But after the expedition, access to the lake was restricted. On New Year's Eve 2000, 4 teenagers from Fort Collins decided to have the scariest New Year at the Lake of Shadows. They took a camera, firecrackers, and alcohol. The recording, later found by the police, begins cheerfully. Laughter, fireworks popping, shouts of Happy New Year. But at some point, one of the boys suddenly falls silent and says, "Shoo, did you hear?" The others laugh. "Oh, come on," he insists. "Someone is calling me." A few minutes later, 2 teenagers go to the water, despite the shouts of their friends. The camera continues to film. You can see how their figures disappear into the darkness. In the recording, you can hear one of the remaining ones shouting, "Stop! Don't look there." Then the image jerks sharply, the camera falls. The last phrase, recorded by the microphone, "They are calling us to celebrate." A week later, 2 bodies were found frozen, with empty eyes, as if they had died in a blissful smile. 2 more were never found. With the advent of digital technology, the lake became the object of new expeditions. A group of students from the University of Colorado decided to conduct an experiment. Leave cameras and recorders near the shore, and themselves move further away. When they returned for the equipment and listened to the recordings, everyone got goosebumps. The voice of their leader, Stephen Hall, was heard on the recorder. "We are alone here." The problem is that he never said this. He kept a diary all day, and his speech is recorded in the transcripts. But on the tape, the voice was there, its timbre, its intonation. One of the students later said, "It was as if the lake was speaking in his words." But why? 2010. The story of Christina Morris. Denver Gazette journalists found a woman named Christina Morris. As a teenager, she visited the lake with her brother and his friend. She recalled, "We heard voices. My friend ran right away. My brother held my hand, but then he broke free and walked away. He was smiling. I had never seen him so happy. I was left alone. The voices kept calling, 'We are waiting for you.' Covered my ears and ran away. Since then, they come to me in my dreams. They call. They say they miss me." This confession became one of the most discussed on the internet. Many considered her confession proof that the lake is connected with the person's personal memories. 2015. Bloggers. The era of YouTube has made the Lake of Shadows even more popular. In 2015, 3 bloggers from California decided to make a live broadcast, 24 hours at the cursed lake. Thousands of viewers watched their stream in real time. At first, everything was usual, jokes, a campfire, stories. But in the morning, the chat began to explode with messages. "Guys, who is that nearby? I hear a woman's voice." The camera on the screen jerked. A scream was heard. "Do you see it too?" And the broadcast ended. The police later found the equipment on the shore. The cameras were intact, but the files were gone. The bloggers were never found. Fragments of the stream recorded by viewers spread across forums. Some considered it a setup, but the parents of the missing begged to stop speculating. "This is not a joke. Our children are gone." Technology has allowed us to peer into places where humans were afraid to go for the first time. A team of Canadian researchers decided to use drones with cameras to explore the depths of the Lake of Shadows. The first hours of recording were ordinary. Cracks in the ice, an empty expanse of water. But on the third flight, the drone recorded something strange. The camera showed silhouettes under the ice. They moved in sync with the people on the shore. One of the researchers raised his hand, and under the ice, a figure repeated his gesture with a second delay. Then the image distorted, the signal began to break. The last frame is a face devoid of eyes and a mouth, as if carved out of ice. A second later, the connection was lost. The drone was never found. The official report sounded dry, loss of equipment due to technical reasons. But one of the participants later told reporters, "This is not technology. They were trying to imitate us. The lake is learning." A group of specialists from Germany and France decided to test the hypothesis of living stone and water with memory. They installed spectral analyzers and recorded infrasound with a frequency of 18 to 20 Hz, a range that is almost inaudible to the human ear, but causes anxiety and hallucinations. But that's not all. Patterns similar to speech appeared in the spectrograms. Repeating phrases, as if recorded and reproduced. The most frightening thing is that a child's voice was heard in the recordings. "Have you come? Play with me." The scientists wrote cautiously in the official report. "We cannot say that this is consciousness, but the phenomenon shows signs of purposeful communication." Unofficially, one of the participants admitted, "I heard the voice of my son. He died 3 years ago. I can't explain it." In the spring of 2022, an international film crew went to the lake. They were filming a documentary about the forbidden places of the world. The last footage from their cameras has been preserved. 6 people are seen sitting around a fire and discussing the data. One suddenly turns around and says, "Someone called me." The others look at each other. No one heard anything. But the camera records a whisper, "Come here." A few minutes later, 2 of the participants get up and walk into the darkness. The camerawoman runs after them, her camera falls to the ground. The image twitches, and then the screen fills with flickering reflections, as if from the depths of the water. The bodies were never found. The official version of the authorities: death as a result of an accident related to an avalanche of ice. But rumors spread online that the police saw the full recordings and chose not to show them to the public. When the region was closed to tourists in 2020, locals began sharing strange observations. One farmer claimed, "At night, I heard as if hundreds of people were talking at once. You couldn't make out the words, just the noise of voices. But it wasn't an echo, it was a real argument, as if a crowd had gathered under the ice." A woman from a neighboring village said, "I saw lights slowly moving on the surface of the water. There are no roads, no cars. But the light was moving, as if someone was carrying torches." Some are sure that when the environment became quieter due to the pandemic, the lake spoke louder. In the spring of 2023, an independent group of researchers, geophysicists, psychologists, and 2 documentary filmmakers went to the Lake of Shadows. It was one of the most prepared expeditions: drones, laser scanners, thermal imagers. On the 4th day, the connection was lost. When the rescuers arrived at the site, they found tents and equipment. The cameras were still working. One of the recordings shows researchers sitting by the fire, discussing their data. Suddenly, one of them turns his head sharply and says, "She called me." The others look at each other, but do not react. A second later, a voice similar to a woman's whisper can be clearly heard on the recording. "Come to me." 2 men get up and walk toward the water. The documentary girl shouts after them. The camera falls to the ground. The last thing it records is a reflection in the water, moving faster than the people themselves. After that, silence. The expedition is officially recognized as killed in an accident. The lake is closed to visitors again. Optical and acoustic illusions? Mass hallucination? Or is it water accumulating the memory of generations and consciousness, trapped under the ice, learning to copy our voices and faces? We cannot give a precise answer, but the fact remains. People are disappearing, technology is recording the impossible, and the voices are becoming more and more insistent. And now the main question for you: what would you do if you found yourself on the shore of the Lake of Shadows? Imagine night, wind from the north, black expanse of water, and suddenly you hear a voice, familiar, dear, someone who has long been gone. Will you be able to turn away? Or will you take a step forward to where the reflection is already smiling at you, but not yours? If you think that the Lake of Shadows is just a legend and a figment of the imagination, write about it in the comments. If you think that there is something more hidden behind this water, share your version. Perhaps it is your thoughts that will help us get closer to the solution. Movie camera. In the next episode, we will go to another place where history and myth are intertwined just as eerily and mysteriously. To stay up to date, subscribe, click the bell, and show this video to your friends. And if one day you find yourself by the water and hear someone calling your name, remember, never answer. This was the story of the Lake of Shadows. Thank you for watching to the end. See you in the next video where the past whispers to us from the depths.